Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Podcast Studio. And we are super excited to have Dr. Eugene Lipov on our show today to be discussing post-traumatic stress syndrome and the God shot. Eugene, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up writing a book and on our podcast.
Wow, that's a great question. First, I was born.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So then, um, I was born in Ukraine, and we lived down in Moscow. Came here. My father had severe PTSD from World War II, and he gave it to my mother and to me. And then when I was a surgical resident, since both my father and my mother were physicians, when I was surgical resident, my mother took her life, and you'll see how it'll kind of work into the book. And so I've been a medical doctor since 1984. So considering how my mother died, I was interested in potentially preventing those kind of problems happening to other people. And I really didn't have much interest in psychiatry. However, I learned how to do something called Stellate Ganglion Block. It's an injection that's done for for pain in the hand, hot hand. I figured out that it worked for hot flashes. Then from there, it took me to treating PTSD using that approach, which has worked really amazing. People have now replicated it, and we saved a bunch of lives doing that. And then one of the people I've treated, who was a Marine, said one of my buddies had a gunshot because it changed his life. That's why he called it that. That's kind of very briefly why the book is called The Gunshot. Here's what it looks like. I'm very proud of it. And then I wrote the book. Ultimately, it's a book of hope. That there is hope that it's possible to get better from mental health disorders, and it's possible to do it rapidly. There you go. Quick summary.
That was a quick summary. So, Janet, what questions do you have?
Well, there's a lot to unpack into this, and I'm sure there's more details, right? So,
I'm ready for you.
so we've heard a lot over the years about different things to help approach PTSD, but I do think that it's really misunderstood. So maybe we should just talk about that a little bit before we go into the treatments.
Oh, sure. Of course. So first of all, PTSD terminology, I think, is problematic. So I have been working for approximately now 10 years to change the name PTSD to PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury, meaning it's a biological condition that is measurable and is treatable using biological treatments. So for example, I was at a big fundraiser approximately a month ago, and everybody's talking about invisible wounds. You probably heard that before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's invisible if you have the wrong scanner. If you have the right scanner, like a PET scanner, a MEG scanner, you can actually see amygdala overactive. So the point is, PTSD is a real biological condition, and the name should be changed to PTSI. In fact, I am doing a campaign right now trying to change the name by doing a survey on my website, itsptsi.com. But if you look at the history of the term PTSD, the first term describing that type of condition was by the Romans 2,000 years ago, called a tremble. Then it became soldier's heart. Then in World War I, it became shell shock. Then battle fatigue, World War II. Then Vietnam syndrome. What's interesting is in Russia, they call it Chechnya syndrome. And the problem is all of those terminologies describing the same condition, and they're all associated with fatalities such as suicides. So then it became Vietnam syndrome, then it became PTSD in 1980, and we're still stuck with this term, which is a problem.
So, I'm curious.
Sure.
You say you can measure it. Will you tell us more about the details now that
Yeah.
you've described it? Tell us about how you measure it.
Well, in order to measure it, you need a nice big machine. There is 3 different machines which can do it. But ultimately, let me tell you what we're looking at. So the analogy I always give people is if you look at a broken leg, right? Before x-ray, you look at it. Is it broken? It's not, I don't know. Take an x-ray, you can see a fracture. So the part of the brain that's responsible for PTSD and anxiety is called the amygdala. Amygdala is part of the limbic system. And somebody has PTSD, that part of the brain is overactive and actually see it. So one of the ways to measure it is PET scan, which is positron emission tomography. So basically what you do is you put a isotope on glucose, and brain only likes to use glucose for food, and that lights up. So it's interesting. I could show you a picture where they had patients had severe symptoms such as difficulty sleeping, such as hypervigilance, impulsivity, the usual PTSD symptoms. They did the Stellate Ganglion Block, the procedure I've pioneered, and you could see a reversal of the change in the amygdala. The amygdala is not as overactive. That's what I mean by being visible.
Okay, so now the pharmacist in me wants to know what's in the nerve block.
Sure. Bupivacaine, you probably heard that drug.
Mm-hmm.
Bupivacaine's medication has been approved by FDA for numbing medicine or local anesthetic since 1972. So bupivacaine, there's no psychiatrically active drugs. Most people, that's a very commonly asked question. It's like, what drug are you putting in? Is that something antipsychotic? Is it absolutely not. What PTSD is, let's talk about what it is physiologically. I think if you see that, it'll be much easier. So let's say somebody's walking along and poof, something horrible happens. Sympathetic system, fight or flight system gets overactive. If it's enough stimulated, it produces NGF, nerve growth factor, which makes the sympathetic nerves grow. So instead of 4, now you got 8, right? So you have extra nerves. Each one of those produces norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is a brother of adrenaline. It revs people up. So if it stays like that, then symptoms continue. We've treated somebody who was injured in Vietnam. I treated him when he was 70 years old, and it still worked for him. So what happens is, as long as those extra nerves maintain norepinephrine level, people have symptoms. When you put local anesthetic on the stellate ganglion, which is the fight or flight nerve controller of the brain, it does two things. In about 5-10 minutes, norepinephrine levels drop very rapidly because it's no longer, stellate no longer pushes more norepinephrine in, and it gets absorbed in the glial cells. Number one. Number two, NGF goes down, and that's required to maintain this extra nerve. So then it goes back to the normal amount of nerves. So people who've had it, like the guy who had it for 50 years, we did the block, he felt markedly better in about 30 minutes. And then that so far lasted has been 8 years. So one procedure.
On one procedure, he had results.
Yes.
Okay, that's amazing. Now, again, the pharmacist in me, and this is my ignorance, not knowing anatomy. So where do you inject the shot?
So if you look at the neck, right? See the Adam's apple right here? Below is the cricoid, which is part of the trachea. If you go to the side, there's a carotid there. We leave the carotid alone. Anything pulsating, we stay far away from. If we go further down, there is a bone in there, thoracic tubercle. That's the C6 anterior tubercle right here. If you go right next to it, that's where the stellate ganglion lives.
Wow,
Just how
that is
God
amazing.
put it there. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, tell us some more success stories. I want to hear these.
So I'll tell you, well, let's see. We talked about, let me tell you the second guy we treated. The second guy we treated was really a very problematic case for him, the poor man. Anyway, so he was special forces. He was walking around in Baghdad, and they were patrolling the streets. And a 10-year-old kid was sent to take him out with an explosive belt. He shoots the child. Piece of the child hit him. Horrible story, of course. He comes home. He tries to kill his wife a few times. You can imagine how well that went. So somehow or other, his employer's father was my patient, and how we connected, which was crazy. Anyway, we do the block. 10 minutes later, he said, I remember what happened, but now it's no longer as bloody or as upsetting. Now it's in black and white. So he did great for about 3 months. He saw fireworks. I kind of flipped him back a bit. So we did it one more time. As far as I know, he's still doing well. It's been about 18 years. He's still with the same woman.
Wow.
Wow, incredible story. So essentially what you're doing is you're changing the neurons' firing patterns, essentially, correct?
The easiest way to think of it, yes, and of course, sympathetic firing patterns, but the easiest way to think about it, not only are we doing that, because local anesthetic, as you know, being a pharmacist, it only lasts 8 hours, right?
Right.
But not only are we doing that transiently, but we're also changing the structure of sympathetic nerves in the brain by doing local. That's the part that took me the longest to figure out. That's crazy.
That is. Janet, I'm sure your mind's going like mine is
Oh
right now.
yeah. Well, I mean, for at least some of the patients, that we've ran into, they're self-medicating too. So how do you approach that? Because there's so much of that with PTSD, no matter if it was in warfare or just trauma that somebody's experienced.
Yeah, so let's talk about statistics for a second. So women with PTSD is about the chance of people having PTSD. There's 10 times more women with PTSD than men after military service, because most people associate PTSD with military service. That's just not true. If you think about the lovely numbers, and unfortunately, I walk around with those numbers in my head all the time. 1 out of 3 women in the United States are sexually abused in their lifetime. Half of them will develop PTSD. So you're looking 1 out of 6. That's a huge number. 1 out of 6 of 150 million. That's a lot of people. And then the other part that people tell me, I'll give you an answer in 1 second though. The other thing is people go, I've never been to war. I've never been raped. Nothing ever happened. I said, well, have you had a husband come home and kind of throw you around a bit and be nasty to you? Oh, yeah, of course. Well, that's called secondary PTSD, meaning you can actually catch PTSD from somebody who has it. That's what happened to my mother and me, and eventually led to my mother's suicide. So I'm a huge believer in that particular concept. And that's why a lot of times when I treat special forces guys, I treat them and their families together. Because if you think of PTSD like a STD, if one person has it and they give it to the other, you fix that guy, or typically it's a male. A woman still has it. It goes back and forth. So you need to treat both.
Oh.
Anyway, to give you a direct answer as far as substance abuse and drug abuse and whatever, right? So people talk about alcohol abuse. That's one of my favorite perspectives. It's alcohol abuse syndrome, whatever the term it is. I think that's just a crazy, dumb way of looking at the word, because all people are trying to do is get a little happiness, a little quiet in the brain, and that's all they're trying to achieve. I'll give you an example. We had a SEAL lieutenant came in. He was drinking a liter of Jack Daniels a day, 10 years. I don't know how he was alive. He was one tough guy. Anyway, we did the block. PTSD symptom, poof, gone. He stops drinking that night.
Oh wow.
Didn't touch, as far as I know. I mean, we followed him 5 years. Did not go back to drinking because it's not a disorder of alcohol abuse. They're trying to reduce the activation of the symptoms that's running too fast. So if you look at sympathetic system running too fast, everything makes sense. Pornography addiction, opioid addiction, they're all the same. But if you can reduce the speed of sympathetics and you don't need to calm yourself down using substances. The point is, focusing on substance abuse disorder is idiotic to me, because what you need to do is reduce the fight and flight nerves. People cannot go to sleep, right? So what do? They bring themselves into a stupor, but then they're only in a very light stage of sleep and they're never refreshed. So it's this continuous cycle.
So do you do a PET scan before and after the treatment?
No, we don't have the kind of money, number one. Number two, I would not, that's radiation. That's positron. You have to give, no.
Yeah.
That's experimental. PET scans are experimental. There is a big study being done in NYU right now, and they're using fMRs, functional MRI. It has a better resolution, and if you have a really big machine, you can really see it well. Hopefully, the results will be out next year, early.
So you don't wait to diagnose them with a PET scan before you do the injection?
No.
Okay.
No. If somebody comes in and they have a few symptoms, that's all we're trying to treat.
Right. Yeah. And so what are the possible side effects from the injection?
Sure. Well, keep in mind, I gave a testimony in front of Congress in 2010. So I told them the great thing about Stellate Ganglion Block, it's not going to grow you a new tail. This procedure has been done for many, many years. So there's only one big study that was done to look at possible risk of stellate. That was done in Germany in 1992. 45,000 stellate ganglion blocks were done. This is before X-ray or ultrasound guidance. Now I use ultrasound guidance, right? So they had 15 seizures. They had 9 pneumothorax or air in the lung. They had a couple allergic reactions, and that's it. I mean, there are more rare exotic complications such as infection. It's supposed to be 1 out of 100,000. And then bradycardia, which is slowing of the heart, very rare, but those things do happen. But if you know what you're doing, it's considered to be a very safe procedure. Has been done, again, since 1925.
And you said it has been used for seizures also?
No.
That was a side effect.
Oh, that was a side effect. Okay.
If you put a needle inside the vertebral artery and inject local anesthetic, there will be a seizure from that. So we stay away from that. Now, it's been used primarily for CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, which is burning of the hand, and headaches and shingles pain. Those are 3 things been used for, typically, until I came around and then we start using for hot flashes and then PTSD.
So how widespread is this therapy? Is it just sitting there and people aren't accessing this, or is it being, because I feel like medicine can be very slow in transition of what.
I prefer the term glacial.
Okay.
We're glacial, if you're
Okay.
lucky. Well, I'll give you a couple answers to that. Number one, approximately 10,000 special forces guys have been treated using this technique, primarily in the United States. I'm a chief medical officer for Stellate Mental Health. We have a site in Israel, and we have 4 sites in Australia. We have 24 sites in the United States, I think I said. We treat probably, 7,000 people per year currently. I really don't remember the number, but it's a decent number. I'm not sure how many I treat in Israel, but over 1,000 so far in the last couple of years. And then Australia, I'm not quite sure on the numbers. Has it been, I think one of the questions I think you may be subtly asking, why has it not been adopted? So if it's such an amazing thing, why not do it, right? That's your question. Yes?
Right.
Very simple answer. Think of who is currently in charge of administering PTSD patients. Follow the money.
So my guess is,
prestige.
my guess is, being a pharmacist, and Jan and I are 2 pharmacists that don't necessarily believe in drugs to treat most long-term disease, including most mental type diseases. My guess is that big pharma makes a lot more money treating PTSD with all kinds of psychotropic drugs than doing a one-time block and calling it good.
I totally agree with that. Well, the numbers are lovely. So in the VA, $8 billion is being spent on those drugs, and about $40 billion is being spent on civilian drugs for PTSD. So, you can see that. The other part is, to be fair to our psychiatric colleagues, it's a weird concept. It's a weird concept that an old procedure can actually have this kind of impact. It's weird. So it's hard for people to understand. I've given a lecture now 4 times at the American Psychiatric Association. First time was 2014, then 2015, then 2019, then 2023. And here we sit today still arguing about it. I think when the NYU study comes out, that may change the trajectory significantly. Because it's hard for people to believe that it's possible to do this. They think it's just, they make the stuff up. And people who followed my work make it up. And people who followed their work make it up. I've done all I can to promote it. That's part of the reason I wrote the book, The Gut Shot, so people can get popularized with that. And it's beautifully written by Lauren. I'm not the writer. I'm more of an idea guy. Anyway, but the whole concept is that it's possible to get better. So that's why it's a book of hope. And it could be a rapid. We're not talking about years. We're talking about minutes or a few days.
So now that you've said that it works for PTSD and for hot flashes, do you see it working for other brain type mediated diseases?
What's interesting, I'm writing the book right now. It's called Stellate Ganglion Block, A Century of Progress. So I've compiled pretty much everything that's been used for across the board. It seems to work for arrhythmia, like VTAC, like a heart fibrillating. There's a lot of literature on that right now. It works beautifully for TBI, traumatic brain injury, especially if you catch it early. That's a mental disorder, right? There was a publication in 2004 about using it on a schizophrenic patient. The schizophrenia went away, which was really interesting. So I've treated about 4 people with schizoaffective disorders, which is like a schizophrenia-like thing. I'll tell you my recent favorite publication came out 2025. You can look it up on my website, dr.eugenelipov.com. Get a load of this story. So this lady had a horrible childhood, highly abusive, very abusive, horrible, right? So as an adult, she had 3 symptoms: PTSD, psychosis, multiple personality disorder. She had 13 personalities. The main one was monster, she called it, because she was so horrible. She's had 3 blocks in 3 years. She had no psychiatric admissions further, no psychosis. PTSD symptoms got better. My favorite part is her multiple personality disorder went from 13 to 3, with the dominant one being a very pleasant matriarch. That interesting? Yeah. So sympathetic system does a lot of different things.
Right.
It also has been used for depression and anxiety.
So speaking of that, the pharmacist in me is trying to figure out the mechanism of action of how it worked for VTAC, probably because it did calm the sympathetic system down to stop the racing heart, right?
Yeah. Well, remember NGF, our friend from the brain? The same thing happens in the heart. So when somebody, let's say, had a heart attack, right? So the NGF from the heart goes to stellate ganglion on the left side and makes sympathetic nerves grow. So now instead of 4, now you got 8. Each one of those in the heart now, right? So each one of those produces norepinephrine. Norepinephrine in the heart accelerates transmission in the heart, and that gives a VTAC loops, and that's what kills, right? So after heart attack, the first day 1, people don't die from occlusion of a coronary artery. They die from malignant arrhythmia.
Right. Great. That was a good explanation. I appreciate that. Thank you. As we wrap this podcast up, Dr. Lipov, tell us what you have a passion for.
I'm trying to prevent people from killing themselves and living in misery of PTSD. And the reason I have that passion is because I saw my mother dead on the floor. So my passion is mental health. I'm going to be doing a TEDx talk in Mexico, January 15th. I'm going to be talking about the name change, PTSD to PTSI. I think the name change itself will reduce stigma, and that shows in my article that I published in 2023, that if you can change the name, the stigma will get reduced, people will have hope, and they will seek care. Should be great. And I just hope this procedure takes off more than, I think we're in the preface, we're about to go big time next year. And I think we're going to save tons of lives and stop the misery.
So let's go ahead and stream his book. So tell us about that. Tell us about your book and why people should read your book, and who is it meant? Who is it meant? Is it meant for healthcare professionals, or is it meant for lay people, or who is it target?
It's meant for lay people. I've published about 65 articles for medical professionals. This is not it. This is a beautifully written book by my partner Lauren Igaldi, and I think everybody will be able to talk about. Will kind of see, if it's not themselves in it, somebody they know. So it's designed for everyone. The last chapter is chapter of hope, that it's possible to get better, and then that it explains to you the realities of life. It also talks about which things like psilocybin, hallucinogenics, which are as safe, which are not as safe. Why does PTSD make you age faster? Right? Little known facts like 85% of men with PTSD have sexual dysfunction, and so on. Those kind of things are very helpful to know, so people don't live in shame. They understand physiology, what's happening in their bodies, and what can be done about it.
That makes sense. So if anybody has any questions, you said you have a website. What's your website?
So I have a couple. Mine is dr.eugenelipov.com. The website for the book is thegodshotbook.com.
And what's the best way to reach out to you if anybody has any questions?
They can email me on my website, or they I really don't know how that works particularly, but it seems to get to me. Instagram. People
Okay,
do
so
the
what is your
Instagram.
Instagram? Do you know what your Instagram handle is?
Yes, Dr. Eugene Lipov. My TikTok, Dr. Eugene Lipov. It's all consistent.
That's easy.
And then,
all right.
And then if people want to get treatment, if they call up or they go on StellaMentalHealth.com, they can set an appointment with me or people I've trained.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Lipov, you've really helped us realize our goal today, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. I will tell you, I learned a lot today. So thank you. This is, I've been a pharmacist for over 30 years, and this was new. I think it was new to Janet and I too. So we're so glad you came on our show to help educate us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Wednesday, because we will be doing our midweek podcast on Wednesday this week instead of Thursday, because it's Thanksgiving. So 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you for tuning in today.